welcome you all. Thank you all for coming, for taking this time at this very, very busy time of year for all of us. There's a lot of ground to cover. I'm not sure how much we will cover, but I invite you all to visit Regavim's website. We will put up the details at the end of this screen. But Regavim's website in general is a tremendous resource. All of our reports, all of our studies, all of our maps, and much, much more is available to read, to download, to share on our website. Lots and lots of resources there, articles, links to press coverage of the issues that we're covering, updates, and more. In addition, anyone who isn't registered here for regular updates, either by WhatsApp, by Telegram, or our monthly newsletter, I encourage you to do so. You can sign up for those things either by contacting me directly or by clicking on the links on our website. So let's just get underway. Tonight's topic is a rather difficult one, but it is one that has tremendous ramifications for not only the day after the war, but every day since 1995. As you all know, the government of Israel entered an agreement with the Palestinian Authority in 1995, known as the Oslo Accords, under which we ceded not only territory, but jurisdiction over that territory, and questions having to do with Israel's security and the ongoing security measures taken in the territories that we ceded and in the territories that we did not. This includes all of the state of Israel. The Oslo Accords were based on a concept of essentially outsourcing our security. The idea was that if the Palestinians were given authority and means and training and funding to police themselves by themselves, there would be essentially much less terrorism for Israel to deal with, much less reason for terrorism to begin with, because Palestinians would not be coming into contact with Israeli forces and would essentially have no reason to continue their armed attacks against Israelis. As I'm sure all of you know, and I don't think I have to explain, that concept has proven to be false. And that concept has proven to be a massive failure. But that concept is far more complex and far more problematic than we're giving it credit for. We try to, and there's a reason for that. Most Israelis, and certainly most Americans and most Europeans, but even Israelis, are unaware of what's actually happening and what the engines behind the terrorism from which we are suffering really are, where the terrorism is being launched from, by whom, and who's carrying it out. And all of those things really deserve a much more transparent conversation, much more transparent presentation by Israel's government than it has ever been given, for very, very clear reasons. We're going to dive first into the presentation, and then we're going to set aside some time at the end to discuss the ramifications of our findings. Regavim has taken on this issue mostly because of pressure by our greatest ally, the American government and the Biden administration, to empower the Palestinian Authority to take control of the Gaza Strip and thereby make greater strides towards the creation of an independent Palestinian state in all of Judea and Samaria, essentially, and the Gaza Strip, the day after the war is completed. So while the American government continues to say that it supports Israel's goal of defeating Hamas, it intends for the replacement for Hamas to be the Palestinian Authority, and specifically the Palestinian Authority's security forces. So we're going to take a look this evening at really what those security forces are, what they do, and what we can learn from all of that. I'm going to begin sharing my screen. I encourage you, if you have questions, to put them in the chat facility at the bottom of your screen, and we'll try to address them afterwards. Again, as always, anything that we don't address during the webinar, you can write to me directly. I'm very easy to find, either through the website. Anything that comes through our website in English comes directly to me, or you can write to me directly by email at naomi@regavim.org. So here we are with our screen, and I hope you are seeing this now. There. Uh-oh. Good. Good. Now, the report that we recently published and that we have presented to the government of Israel, to the Knesset, and has received tremendous media attention worldwide, really, was the basis for editorials in the Wall Street Journal and the New York Sun. Caroline Glick did an entire webinar on it, Mark Levin. The list goes on and on. It's received attention in Europe as well. And this is the name of the report: Officers by Day, Terrorists by Night, Palestinian Authority Security Forces Involvement in Terrorism. Now, first, some background. I'm going to try to be concise with the background, but here we go. Why is this not advancing? Oh, okay. So, in 1995, the State of Israel signed the Oslo Accords, and the Palestinian police were established in order to maintain internal security in areas A and B, the areas that were placed under Palestinian Authority control. The idea was, again, to outsource Israel's security to the Palestinians, to essentially place in the hands of the Palestinian Authority responsibility for fighting terrorism and coordinating with Israel's security forces. That included clauses that would have coordinated and joint security patrols, both by Palestinian police and Israeli security teams, together patrolling the areas of interface between Palestinian Authority-controlled areas and Israeli areas. And that would include all the internal policing, law and order in areas A and B, and the Gaza Strip as well. Now, when the Palestinian police force was established in 1995, the stipulation was that there would be 6,000 police officers in areas A and B, and that those would be essentially half of them would be people who were already in the territory, and the other half would be allowed to be brought in, as were many, almost all of the leadership of the Palestinian Authority at the time. You will recall that Yasser Arafat himself and all of his, essentially all of his, I won't call them accomplices, but that's what I'd like to say. But the entire upper echelon of the Palestinian Authority was brought in. They had been in exile in Tunisia, to which they had been banished from Lebanon because they were bombing Israel. And the American government forced the Israelis not to wipe them out, but to allow them to be removed further afield so that they could no longer pose a threat to the state of Israel. So thousands of Palestinian terrorists were allowed to make a new base in Tunisia. And at that time, thousands of them were brought back in to the areas that the state of Israel ceded to the Palestinian Authority. And many of those same terrorists were drafted to the Palestinian police force. What you see on the right-hand side of the screen, I apologize that it's only in Hebrew. This was taken from an outside source, so I could not edit the language here, but you will see the symbols of various arms of the Palestinian Authority Security Forces and their parallels in Israeli security forces. So you have the General Security Service, which is essentially like Israel's Mossad. You have that's externally facing, and you have the internal, more or less like the FBI, and then you have the National Security Force, which is essentially like the IDF or the American Army. You have the police, which is like a regular national civilian police. You have the Presidential Guard. You also have military intelligence, and you have a whole wing that is responsible for coordination with the State of Israel. And then you have other things, including the national search and rescue type of operations. And there's also for some strange reason, a customs police and various other branches that eventually were created. So again, 6,000 police officers were mandated for areas A, B, and the Gaza Strip. In a subsequent accord that involved the Hebron Agreement, an additional, an additional several thousand, up to 4,000 additional policemen were mandated. Today, despite that limitation, there are as far as we know, there are 35,000 Palestinian police officers in these various branches and others. Now, some reports from several years ago put the number actually at 60,000, but even if it's only 35,000, that is the highest ratio of police to civilians in the world per capita. So this is a massive force. These forces are trained, armed, and paid their salaries by the United States of America, the European Union, and a conglomerate of European countries. They have training grounds in Jericho and in Jordan. At the time that this was all set up, really the first time the whole thing collapsed and the Americans took over and got even more deeply involved, a brigadier general named Dayton was sent over, and he trained the forces. He was in charge of this whole operation for almost 5 years, to the point where the Palestinian forces were actually called Dayton's forces, because it was carried out under the auspices of the U.S. Embassy in Israel and under an organization called USCC, which we still find today roaming around all of Judea and Samaria freely, in Area C where they should not be, et cetera, all sorts of other problems. But that's an issue for another night. So we have the establishment of the Palestinian Authority's quote-unquote police force, a massive armed force that from day one drafted to its ranks known, convicted, wanted terrorists who were part of the Fatah brigades. They were part of Force 17, if those words mean anything to any of you. If any of you are old enough to remember, Force 17 was a very, very formidable, internationally sanctioned terrorism organization that was affiliated with Arafat and his Fatah movement. And the officers were drafted directly into the Palestinian police force. This should have been a sign from the very beginning that things were not going to go smoothly, because they did not make any attempt to conceal the background of the people whom they were giving the weapons to. And that is what we ended up with. So we're going to carry on now a little bit further into the thick of things, if I can get it to move. So the security coordination that was meant to happen actually fell apart rather quickly. The joint patrols turned into a bloodbath of Israelis. Palestinian police officers simply turned their weapons on the people sitting in the vehicles with them when they were carrying out the joint patrols. coordination was suspended and then was reinstated. And again, coordination is sporadic. Notable breaks happened in September 1996. I will remind you that this is only approximately 1 year after the whole thing got off the ground, when Arafat initiated what would have been called the Intifada, but it wasn't. It was called the Western Wall Tunnels riots. They were waiting for an excuse to unleash terrorism from their newly gained positions, and they did. And these riots went on for quite some time. They blamed Netanyahu for having opened a new exit that had already been approved and coordinated with the Waqf, etc. And still, they unleashed massive riots, and many Jewish lives were lost in the process. The coordination was suspended and then was reinstated afterwards. General Dayton took the reins and retrained and rebuilt the entire force. Once again, when the Second Intifada broke out back in 2000, and I will remind you that the excuse that time was, once again, that some sort of attack on Al-Aqsa. And this is a repeating theme. So again, over 20 years ago, they unleashed an intifada claiming that the state of Israel was somehow threatening to destroy the Muslim holy places on the Temple Mount. And once again, when the intifada broke out, suspended all security coordination. But even during the periods when the coordination was on and not suspended, the Palestinian Authority Security Forces never prevented terrorism, which was what they were created to do. Another thing they were supposed to do was to hand over terrorists to the Israelis, to capture and hand over by specific people whom the Israelis named to stand trial in Israel for acts of terrorism. So they never did that, not even once. And at a certain point, they actually did some show trials for some of these terrorists, put them on trial, put them in prison, and then in a revolving door policy, let them out of prison minutes later. And in most cases, actually drafted them to the Palestinian police force. So not only did they not hand over wanted terrorists, they actually put them on the payroll, gave them weapons, and gave them high ranks in the Palestinian Authority's security forces. So the situation has never been good, but as our research now shows that it's getting worse. And what we identified in this report, the report that we published only a few weeks ago, is that since in the last 3 years, the rate at which Palestinian Authority officers in the various arms of the Palestinian Authority's security forces have been actively involved in acts of terrorism. According to media reports now, at least 50% of the Palestinian Authority's security forces officers are simultaneously members of what they call resistance movements, armed terrorist organizations. That includes the Al-Aqsa Brigades, that includes the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, that includes the Lion's Den, and other militant groups. We discussed in a previous webinar the approval rates for Hamas among the Palestinian Authority, among both Palestinians, rank and file Palestinians living in Judea and Samaria and Gaza, and of the Palestinian Authority's leadership, the actual official statements of support for Hamas, not only for its tactics and the massacre of October 7th, but also for the ultimate goals expressed by Hamas of eradicating the state of Israel and killing every Jew on the planet. So that's a more subtle thing, but here we have actual participation in acts of terrorism committed by people on the Palestinian Authority Security Forces payroll. What you're looking at here on this side of the screen is an official Palestinian Authority. You can see their emblem here, and their security forces here. These are the emblems that we saw in the previous slide. This is called a martyr's proclamation, and it shows the pictures of members of the Palestinian Authority's official police force who were killed in action while carrying out acts of terrorism against Israelis. All of these people, and what we're going to see, we'll see in the report, we enumerate all their names, the exact acts of terrorism in which they were involved, as well as the names of their victims. These people that you're seeing here are responsible for the deaths of countless Israelis. So this video, I apologize. What we have here is something, an example of one of the clips that we downloaded from social media. The Palestinian Authority is very, very active on social media, as are all of their security forces. And this is after one of their quote unquote martyrs was killed. His wife showed what was in his closet. And you'll notice here in the frame, the emblem of his uniform, as well as, we'll see the rest of it. Sorry. You get the general idea that she's showing you all of the things that he used to carry out terrorist attacks while in uniform. So behind the smokescreen of security coordination, they have a very, very well-oiled system that not only supports but encourages terrorism. So I'd like to stress what all of you already know, and what I think every English speaker in the world knows, is that there is a program, a basic, one of the main reasons that the Palestinian Authority says it exists is to pay salaries to terrorists and their families. That's called the Pay for Slay program, that it has been outlawed by the United States government in the Taylor Force Act. That means that after a person commits an act of terrorism, attacks an Israeli, either manages to kill them or manages to wound them, and is sentenced to prison time in an Israeli prison, the Palestinian Authority pays a monthly stipend depending on the size of the crime, on a sliding, ascending scale. The more you get, the longer your prison sentence, the more money you and your family will receive for carrying out acts of terrorism and killing Israelis. So that's one side of the coin. But the other side of the coin here is people who are already on the payroll and who carry out acts of terrorism. So what we have here, what you're looking at, are some of the aspects of official Palestinian Authority policy that encourage and support terrorism, aside from the monetary. So you have full military funerals with military honors for terrorists who are members of the Palestinian Authority Security Forces. When they are killed in the act, they are given full honors and military funerals, glorification, and they become national martyrs. In the middle, you see these monthly salaries for terrorists, and we have dozens and dozens and dozens of instances of public statements in which the leadership, all from the top all the way down to the lowest level of Palestinian Authority government, explaining that they will use their very last dime to pay for quote unquote martyrs' stipends. And that means they have no intention of stopping the Pay for Slay program. We'll get back to that later on in the presentation. But in addition to that, you have this system of glorification. The Palestinian Authority's textbooks and school curricula and national days of remembrance and special holidays are established in Palestinian Authority schools throughout areas A and B. to commemorate and glorify their quote-unquote martyrs, these terrorists who are members of the Palestinian Authority Police Force. You have also countless instances on social media and in the newspapers of support for the families of quote-unquote martyred terrorists. These plaques and all sorts of other things. And you see also they have public memorial projects, streets, plazas, buildings, programs, summer camps. All of these things are named in memory of these national heroes, terrorists on the Palestinian Authority payroll. So we track all of these things, and we understand that our quote-unquote partners for peace, the people who are supposed to be the moderating force with whom Israel is making peace, have no interest whatsoever in peace. And it becomes more and more clear the more deeply we dive into Palestinian media. So what we do is what Regavim always does, and that is that we collect facts, we collect data, and we let the facts speak. In this case, we let the Palestinian Authority speak for itself. And then we take a step back and we listen to what those statements, what those facts, what the data that we've collected actually say. That means that we examined all of these martyr proclamations that have been published by the Palestinian Authority itself and by each of their security branches. We tracked in the last 3 years alone 46 martyrs, quote unquote, killed in action, members of the Palestinian Authority Police Force who were killed while trying to kill Israelis, another 7 who were critically wounded in action, and dozens more who are in Israeli prisons for carrying out acts of terrorism against Israeli civilians or Israeli security personnel. So the first 3 months of 2024 alone, there were 8 Palestinian Authority Security Force officers involved in terrorist attacks against Israelis. After we published this report only 2 weeks ago, there were an additional 2 attacks. More Israelis were killed and wounded by members of the Palestinian Authority Police who were killed in action. And here's where we get to the real problem. The real problem, in my opinion, it's the cover-up. It's not, it should be, it doesn't surprise me that the Palestinian Authority's security forces are geared toward killing Israelis. This is not a surprise, knowing how they were established, who they were staffed with, and what the stated aims of the Palestinian Authority are. What really is the surprise is the cover-up. After there's a terrorist attack in Israel, and you read the newspaper reports, or you read a police press statement, or you read an IDF press statement, what you will see and what you will not see are the real problem. So what you will not see is that when a terrorist is affiliated with the Palestinian Authority Security Forces on the payroll of the police or their internal security or their FBI or their Mossad or their tax authority police or their presidential guard, as was the case last week, you will not see that mentioned in official Israeli press statements, nor will you see it in the Israeli media. When they are affiliated with Hamas or when they're affiliated with the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, which are essentially opposed, quote unquote, to the Palestinian Authority, there you will see their organizational affiliation, but you will not see it when it is an affiliation that is casts a shadow over our alleged, let's put it that way, our supposed partners for peace. And this has been a longstanding policy. This has been policy since 1995. All the way back in the beginning of the Oslo Accords, when the Palestinian Authority immediately violated every single clause and every single basic principle through which it was created and for which it was created, the mantra that was repeated over and over again was, these are our partners for peace. They will be a moderating force. They are a secular government. These are just, and the Israeli victims are victims of peace, victims of, the enemies of peace. Well, the policy has served and continues to serve both the foreign and the internal proponents of Palestinian statehood. Because if you finally admit that you don't have a partner for peace, and there is no one with whom you can make that peace at this time, then you have to abandon this two-state solution, and you have to put on the back burner empowering the Palestinian Authority to take control of even more territory than it already has. And that is really the reason that we published this report. It's not because the Israeli government is not aware of this. It's because they're making believe that they're not aware of this. They're making believe, they believe actually that they can delude the Israeli public and carry on the path in which they have been so invested for over 2 decades. And that is the Oslo path, which has brought us nothing good. So the cover-up is the issue. And that's what we're working very, very hard to fight against. So let's talk about some conclusions before I try to take some questions, and let's try to put this in context. Regavim has identified 80 Palestinian Authority terrorists active in the last 3 years alone. What you see here on your screen are only a few of the victims. Some of you may recognize some of them. Some of them are more recent. Some of them are less recent. All of them were killed by people who were armed, trained, and paid by the government of the United States and the European Union, and allowed to enter the territories ceded to the Palestinian Authority by the State of Israel. This has to stop. There is no systematic or official database of Palestinian Authority Security Force officers who have turned their guns on Israeli civilians or security personnel. And that is part of the cover-up. If you ask how many there are, how many of these people have turned against us, you will get no answer. And that is really the area in which all of us, Regavim and everyone watching this webinar this evening, can have an impact. And that is to share this information, to make it clear, both to the public and to our elected officials, no matter where we are, that the Palestinian Authority is not a partner for peace. The public debate about the establishment of a Palestinian state has to be conducted in an atmosphere of full disclosure. It has to be, this problem has to become common knowledge and has to be transparent. We need data in order to be able to make an informed decision about whether or not we want to continue to outsource our security, the safety and security of every man, woman, and child in Israel, and the state of Israel as a sovereign state. If we want to outsource that security to a Palestinian Authority security forces that are sworn to our eradication. So another conclusion is that, and this is quite shocking, 3 weeks ago, our Minister of Defense stood up on a podium and announced that if the Palestinian Authority chooses to turn its guns on us, we will know how to respond, but we're not there yet. And that is simply a lie. The scenario in which the Palestinian Authority turns its guns on Israel and Israelis is not a future possible or negligible scenario. It is a current reality, and it has been for 25 years. This is not something new, And it is something that is gathering steam because we are unwilling to look at it. We are unwilling to acknowledge it. We are unwilling to admit that this is not working. And people are paying with their lives. Now, I'm going to play for you this video.
On October 7th, we met Hamas's terrorists face to face, a deadly wake-up call. Now, let's meet the Palestinian Authority's terrorists. The Palestinian Authority Security Forces were established by the Oslo Accords and are supported and trained by the US and European countries. For years, people have been saying that the Palestinian Authority fights terrorism, that it's a partner for peace. But what do the Palestinian Authority Security Forces have to say about that?
وايضا كأجهزة أمن منذ 30 عام الأمن الفلسطيني قتل أكثر من 2000 شهيد.
Let's not fool ourselves. The PA incites terrorism, the PA funds terrorism, and the PA commits terrorism. We all know that the PA pays terrorists who murder Jews. But it doesn't end there. Not even close. The PA security forces, our partners, are involved in every aspect of terrorism, and I'm very proud of it. A new report by the Regavim movement exposes the real numbers. The official Fatah Martyrs proclamations boast about dozens of PA officers who were killed while committing acts of terrorism in the last 3 years. Add to that dozens of Palestinian Authority terrorists in uniform who were arrested for planning and executing other attacks. We emphasize, these are people who work in the Palestinian security forces. At the same time, they carried out terror attacks. These are only those who were caught. The figures do not include perpetrators of terror attacks who have not been arrested, and the thousands of supporters of terrorism among PA employees. This shouldn't surprise anyone. Many of the PA security officers are released terrorists, including those with Jewish blood on their hands. These terrorist officers are honored in military funerals and are heroes and role models in the Palestinian education system. Public buildings and streets are named after them, and their families receive official support and prestige. So, you tell us, does the Palestinian Authority really fight terror? Have we really woken up?
We prepared that video so that you could share. It's essentially this entire webinar condensed into 2 minutes. I hope that you will all download it and share it. Anyone who's interested, we can send it as a separate file, or you can access it on our YouTube channel. It is crucial that this information is part of the public discussion of the future of all of the territory of the Gaza Strip, of Judea and Samaria, and of Israel. Together with the other things that we've seen on previous webinars, including the massive takeover of the buffer zone all along Israel's security fence, and the Palestinian Authority's clear official support for the massacre of October 7th and the objectives and tactics of Hamas, all of these things together should be brought to the, I wouldn't say even brought to the attention. I would say they have to be shouted from the rooftops when our enemies, and especially when our allies, talk about the day after the war. There is no possible way of revitalizing the Palestinian Authority when this is what we're up against: active involvement in terrorism from the highest levels down to the lowest. Again, none of this is unknown to Israeli officials, to the Israeli government, and to the IDF. It should not be unknown to the American administration and to the American people. So now I'm going to try to address some of the questions that we have in the chat. Let me see if I can. Yes, okay. In the chat, you will see how to find us, our website, and my email. Yes, Oslo was signed in September 1993, but the deployments and division of the territory and establishment of the Palestinian forces happened only in 1995. No other particular questions, so I'm going to mention one other thing, which is extremely relevant to this entire presentation. Over the past several weeks, a process has come to our attention in which representatives of the Palestinian Authority have been in intensive talks with the American administration to redefine financial aid. In other words, these are all very, very carefully worded statements, but what's at the bottom of it is extremely worrying. As I mentioned in the beginning of my remarks, the Taylor Force Act was passed by the U.S. administration, by the U.S. government. It is an American law. The Taylor Force Act prohibits funding for the Palestinian Authority that is used to pay for terrorists, the Pay for Slave program. So rather than actually demanding that the Palestinian Authority stop paying terrorists, the American government and European governments have continued to pay the Palestinian Authority to transfer huge sums of money. And I will repeat what I've said in previous webinars. The Palestinians are the largest recipients per capita of financial aid in the world. And as you all know, money is fungible. What that means is the United States government says it is against the law for us to pay the Palestinian Authority to pay terrorists. So we will not pay terrorists. We will pay the Palestinian Authority. We will give them financial aid so that they can do other things, infrastructure projects, housing for people, water, government, whatever it is. But that frees up money for them to use to pay terrorists. So it's all extremely fluid. Now they're going one step further. The talks that are currently underway in Washington between the Palestinian Authority and the Biden administration aim to redefine money that is paid to the families of Palestinian terrorists by simply saying, we're not going to pay families of terrorists according to the sliding scale established by the severity of their crime. We're going to instead pay the families whose breadwinners or members of the family are either dead or incarcerated. So this is now going to be labeled as humanitarian aid and not as pay for slay. So it's kind of an Orwellian masterstroke. Rather than saying, yes, we're going to pay terrorists' families, they say, well, we're going to pay indigent families, we're going to provide aid to social welfare aid to families who have lost their breadwinners. This is terrible. This is simply gutting the law of its intention, creating a workaround that will allow continued support for and encouragement of terrorism. I would point out that murderers of Israelis, their families, if they are killed in action, their families receive monthly stipends that are considerably higher than any Palestinian, normal Palestinian salary. So this encourages people to actually take care of their families by killing Jews. This is the whole point of what the Taylor Force Act was supposed to combat. So now they're going to establish a new wording that will allow the American government to directly pay these families because they're now in financial straits because their breadwinners have either been killed or incarcerated for killing Israelis. So I hope that you understand the absurdity of this situation. I hope you understand the outrageous idea of allowing this to move forward. And I hope that you will all, those of you who are in the United States, reach out to your members of Congress and demand that the Taylor Force, not only the letter of the law, but the spirit of the law be upheld. And we have to do the exact same thing if you're sitting here in Israel, demand that the Israeli government not turn a blind eye and make believe they don't understand what the significance of this rewording is. Israel's under tremendous pressure on many, many fronts from the American government. When anything is now labeled as humanitarian aid, Israel has a very, very difficult time refusing, as we have all seen in the news. And this will be one more area in which, quote unquote, humanitarian aid is cynically used to support and encourage the murder of Israelis and Jews everywhere. So I thank you for your participation. I see
Naomi, we have a few questions.
Okay, so I see there's one here. Have you shared this very important information to the leadership of AIPAC, who lobby Congress daily? So we are certainly trying to get it to AIPAC. If any of you have connections, we'd be very, very happy to share that with them. I can sit down and have a meeting. We don't have any direct connection with AIPAC, and we would love to establish one. Coverage of this report, as I mentioned in the beginning, has ranged everywhere from editorials in the Wall Street Journal to the New York Sun, Mark Levin, Tablet Magazine, Washington Times, many American media outlets, and some European outlets have picked it up and have published the findings. But very few of them have actually properly put it in the context of the day after the war and the American administration's vision for a quote unquote revitalized Palestinian Authority being empowered to take control over even more territory than it already has. This would be a disastrous outcome, and we all, I believe, should be fighting it with all our might at the very top of our agenda. It's certainly something that is within our power to bring to the attention of the public, of voters in the United States in this election, run up to the election, and to public opinion in Israel, which I believe has had a rude awakening and is now beginning to see things as they really are. So unfortunately, it takes sometimes a tremendous shock to the system, but it's not gone unnoticed, and Israelis have overwhelmingly, including members of Knesset, 99 of whom voted against the establishment of a Palestinian state at this time. So yes, this is crucial information. I encourage you to share it with everyone you know. The resources are on our website and are easily accessible. We will send out an email with links to the recording of the webinar, and also we will send out a link to the video on YouTube that you can download and share. I encourage you to sign up for our WhatsApp or Telegram updates, because we send out these videos and files and links on a regular basis. 2 more will be going up in the coming days on recent terrorist attacks carried out by citizens of Israel, Israeli Bedouin, who were allowed to repatriate were allowed to get full citizenship in the Negev, although they were born and raised in Gaza, because they have family members who, through polygamous marriages, have taken up residence and are citizens of Israel. There's a shocking situation which we have discussed and which I hope to return to in a future webinar, about the practice of polygamy in the Bedouin sector in Israel. But just to give you a teaser for that topic, the state of Israel finally arrested one of the sisters of Hamas Politburo chief Ismail Haniyeh. He himself is hiding out in Qatar, but his sisters are Israeli citizens living in the Negev. They are married to Israeli Bedouin, and they are maintaining terrorist activity hubs within Israel. One of the sisters was arrested recently. In her home, the Israeli forces confiscated mind-boggling quantities of cash, gold, printed materials, all sorts of incitement, and all sorts of proof of ongoing contacts with hostile terrorist organizations and operatives of Hamas. And this is a situation that Israel has allowed to flourish within its borders. I'm not talking about Judea and Samaria. I'm not talking about the border with Gaza. I'm talking about in the Negev. Neighbors of Beersheba, Ismail Hania's family are living there and carrying out Hamas operations from within Israel. This is another situation that Israel is finally facing and reining in. And I hope to discuss the practice of polygamy and its impact on Israel in a future webinar. I will see, what does Israel have to say? Israel has a lot to say. The question is, who's listening? How do we influence Israeli leaders? This is exactly what we are doing. This report, the data that you saw this evening and much more, was presented in a Knesset Foreign Affairs and Defense Committee hearing. The members of the government and the Security Cabinet have received this data and are digesting it as we speak. We will continue to work with members of Knesset and members of the Security Cabinet to address these issues and to promote what we have suggested as solutions. None of these things are irreversible, and none of these things are insurmountable. All we need is the political will, and that is a function of public support and determination, a unified voice that we share with Zionists around the world. Any other questions? Let's see. Was that the sister who got medical care in Israel? Ismail Hania's sister not only got medical care, yes, one of them, they both do, they all do, and their children do, because they are now Israeli citizens. They married an Israeli, applied for citizenship, and were granted citizenship. Their children are Israeli citizens, and as you can imagine, like 99% of the eligible draft age children in the Negev born in the Bedouin sector, 99% do not serve in the IDF. Unfortunately, many of the ones who do serve in the IDF have been found to have been either working against the state of Israel or working to line their own pockets. There have been massive problems with leaks of sensitive information through the Bedouin serving in the IDF and on sensitive army installations all over the south of Israel. Again, this is a topic for another night, but unfortunately, the strands come together in very challenging ways, and Regavim has been at the forefront warning about many of these situations for years. Sometimes we don't want to be right, but unfortunately, in far too many of the issues that Israel is facing right now, we've been right. So the government is turning to us in an unprecedented way to hear what we have to say, to gain insight, because we've been working on solutions for these problems for so many years. So on that note, I will encourage you to, again, look at our website, see the resources that are there, see our plan, not only our reports on the problems, but also our plans for their solution. And as always, I encourage you to join our update list, our newsletter list, to stay abreast of what we are up to and what's happening in Israel. And of course, if you see fit, to support our work, our research, our activism. Our website has a donate button, and anyone who needs further guidance, please reach out to me directly, and I'll be happy to share any other materials or any other information or point you in the right direction. Thank you all, and I wish you all an uplifting, peaceful, and rejuvenating Passover holiday and spring season. We hope that as throughout Jewish history, this time of renewal will bring us national redemption, and personal strength and fulfillment. Thank you all, and good night.